Welcome to The Creative Influencer, where we discuss all things creative with an emphasis on influencers. The Creative Influencer is hosted by John Pfeiffer. John is an entertainment attorney in Santa Monica, California, who represents influencers and other creatives.
Welcome back to our special two-part interview of Rob Kozinets. Rob is a professor at USC and teaches a class about influencers. If you haven't listened to the first part of the interview, it's not necessary to understand what we're going to talk about today, but it will put today's conversation in context. So, sit back and relax. Be prepared to take in the world of influencers with Professor Rob Kozinets. And now we're going to take a virtual spring break.
All right. Okay. Oh, yeah, there it is.
Which means...
Okay, good. Do I get to go to Daytona Beach or something?
No, what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask you some personal questions.
Oh, wow. Okay.
What question do you ask to find out the most about a person?
Well, I usually start my interviews with, can you tell me about yourself? And that's, so I start the class, usually I interview people and it's called a grand tour question, and then you probe. So can you tell me a bit about yourself? Usually I find the first thing that people say out of their mouth is usually pretty interesting and important.
Yeah.
And then I'll try and unpack that and draw on that. But yeah, just a simple tell me about yourself, I think is a good way to figure out.
And normally what I do to my guests is I throw that question right back to them, but I've already asked you a lot about yourself.
Yeah, you have.
What question would you most like to know the answer to?
How do we fix this mess we're in? Yeah, that would be a big one.
I think it's called elections. But
It's called which?
Elections.
Oh, I wish. Yeah, that would be nice.
Do you collect anything?
Oh, yeah.
What do you collect?
Oh, my. I collect books, as you can see.
Right.
I collect comic books. I still have a stamp collection.
Do you actively collect stamps?
Not anymore. No, but I actively read and like my comic collection. Yeah, it's mostly down to books now. Yeah, and citations. I collect citations.
Very professorial thing to do.
Right.
If you had 30 minutes a day to do anything, what would you do?
30 minutes a day to do, so I can pick the anything?
You can do the anything.
I would like to plant trees. I wish I was doing more in terms of pulling carbon out of the air.
What TV channel doesn't exist but really should?
That's a great question. I think an environmental station where we actually get news about how the planet and species are doing, besides just all this political back and forth, this ping pong game that we're all addicted to. I'd like to know on a continent by continent basis
What's going on?
How we're doing. Yeah. And also, I think, that would be the station. An animal station would be great too. Not Animal Planet, not just pets, but a whole bunch of different species.
What makes you laugh?
What makes me laugh? Life makes me laugh. My kids make me laugh. Everything.
What's your guilty pleasure? And you can't say books.
My guilty pleasure, going down to the beach and just walking in the waves. Yeah, I love that. I love the ocean.
Especially from Canada.
Yeah, being close to the ocean is just, it's wonderful. Haven't been landlocked most of my life.
Right. And I grew up in Nebraska, so I get it.
You get it.
What's the one talent you wish you had?
The one talent I wish I had. I'd like to be able to dunk.
Yeah, that's it. I'll go with you on that one.
Yeah.
What's your
5'10", this is no chance.
I'm 6'1" and I couldn't dunk.
Yeah.
What's your biggest pet peeve?
My biggest pet peeve, people not thinking. That drives me crazy. People who believe what they believe and won't think won't use that muscle in their head.
Which is a perfect intro for tell me something that's true that almost nobody agrees with you on.
Something that's true that almost nobody agrees. That our beliefs are a lot more unstable than we think and easier to shift. I think everybody's so locked into what they think right now, a lot of polarized positions, that they don't realize that everything is a social construction.
So let's go to our virtual.
Thank goodness we're done with that.
Spring break is done. Put away the margaritas.
That was the most tense spring break I've ever been on.
The next two classes you have are the different categories of influencers.
Yeah.
And how basically they've taken their expertise or their interest and have turned it into their channel.
Mm-hmm. Kinds of influencers. Yeah, like entertainment or travel.
Technology. So having talked to the people in the field and talked to those influencers, what advice would you have for a budding influencer?
Yeah, I mean, I think you've got to be passionate about what you do. And I think if you are the kind of person who likes to go deep into a topic, then pursue this. I mean, we had a lot of people at the beginning of the class who were asking the influencers who came in, is it too late? Is the game over? Is it saturated? And to a person, the people who were responding said, it's just beginning. This industry is just starting, and there is room for every single kind of influencer. So I think it's easy to pick one of the things that's out there now already, like automotive or cosmetics or something. But I think the advice that I would ultimately give would be find something that's more unique, more you, and ride that, have that grow. So we had this one guy, and I can get you his name. I'm sorry, I'm bad with names. So I should have boned up on it. But he took his passion for countries and started doing YouTube videos based on each country alphabetically. And he's like halfway through the 200 and something countries in the United Nations, and did a feature video about
each country.
Yeah, he's a guy who's fascinated by geography, fascinated by politics. He put these things together, and he's been very successful at gathering an audience based on his passion for all these different countries. So Azerbaijan.
I think every middle school teacher would want to get that.
Oh yeah, but he made it funny and catchy. I mean, he really had a talent for bringing these topics to life. And I think that's the kind of thing I really love, and I think people need to do if they're going to break through some of that clutter, is be yourself, right, and be unique, and find something that's a little bit different about yourself and really go with that.
I mean, I think there'll always be room for makeup videos, but I don't know how there can be.
Well, there are sub-markets within that too, right? It gets more and more striated. So the more you understand, the more you find, okay, right, well, I don't find something for people like me, people with my eye color or my skin color,
whatever it happens to be,
or my age or whatever it is, right?
And then as I was going through your syllabus, this was the most fascinating part for me because I don't have exposure to it on a daily basis, was the around the world tour of influencers.
Yeah.
And you turned me on to an Amazon Prime documentary, People's Republic of Desire.
What'd you think?
I was shocked.
Yeah.
I was shocked. Tell us about what it is.
Well, it's amazing. I mean, they have these basically live streamers who go on in China and share their lives, but they're also asking for money. And they can make millions of dollars just by sort of building a relationship with an audience and then just straightforward cashing it in. It's not, they're not selling anything necessarily
that was the
themselves.
Fascinating part to me.
I mean, it's just WeChat transfers of money, which is, in China they have apps that are your social media. They're like WhatsApp, but they're also your bank account. So it's money and it's social media and it's information and a Twitter type microblog all at once. And so You can watch someone in social media and send them money directly. And this is a huge, huge business in China. And what the documentary really brought out that was fascinating was some of the people who were sending large amounts of money to other people.
Didn't have the money to send.
Some didn't, and some just had so much money
that it was
that it was, like nothing for them to send someone $100,000 who needed it. And then they have these competitions and contests to see who can earn more.
So tell me about the different platforms. It's a great lead-in for the different platforms in China, South Korea, Japan,
Russia.
How are they different?
I mean, well, one obvious difference is in China, there's something called the Great Firewall of China. So if you're in China, my son just did an exchange semester in Hong Kong. As soon as you go to China, boom, this wall comes down and you can't get your Gmail, you can't get your Facebook, you can't find your Instagram anymore. You have to use Chinese apps. And so they have grown up in a protected type of ecosystem on their own. But they're incredibly rich. I would say the Chinese are ahead of anyone in the world in terms of social media and what it can do and how it works and how interwoven with people's daily life it is than anybody else. They're very sophisticated programs that they have. They combine all the things I was talking about, payment systems and social media, with gaming, with communication. And they're also tightly monitored, so the government shuts things down too. When things get a little hairy, like the problems that we're having with Twitter now, you don't hear about it anymore.
It just
stops. Yeah.
So do they have, what is the Facebook equivalent in China?
Yeah, it's something called Renren, I think.
And I assume they have an Instagram equivalent?
Well,
a photo.
WeChat, I think, does it, and there are a couple other ones. Now you're catching me at a time
when
I haven't got my full expertise, but it's not a one-to-one correspondence, John. It's a mix and match. So you might have one platform that does what 3 or 4 different platforms do here. And then another one that does other ones, and then some that do things like live streaming that we don't even have here.
And which came first? Did the Chinese rip off ours, or did we rip off theirs?
If we're going to use the term rip off, they ripped off. I'm proud to say,
borrowed.
Borrowed. They developed our technology, but kind of like the Japanese in the 1980s with cars, they've gone beyond where we were, and they're now ahead. They're ahead in terms of including things, because a command economy can kind of push things through and have it adopted really quickly. Things like payment systems are well ahead of where we are.
It's if Apple were a country.
As if Apple were a country, right. But there's also something different there, which is the cultures are different. So I think China right now, a lot of the people are focused very much on capitalism and making money and working incredibly hard and incredibly long hours. We look, we're looking a lot like we're slowing down and relaxing and enjoying, we're on momentum. We're running on momentum here. That's not the way it is in China. They're really gearing up, and when you're there, I don't know, you feel that energy, that they're very hungry still, and they're very ambitious. And because of that, I think a lot of Chinese people don't have the time for the social connection. And so they get that social connection online. And social media assumes a much greater importance in people's social lives than it does in America, where people still have a lot of in-person interaction. And so that kind of framing of things really changes. Then you've got countries like Africa, where mobile phones are huge, but laptop and internet desktop use are a lot less, and they have a lot of SMS type relations. So it evolves for the different country at the technological stage they're in, the cultural stage they're in, what's happening.
And then how is Europe different?
Yeah, I would split Europe into a couple. So Europe is, in a lot of ways, still using a lot of American social media technology. So Facebook is still huge there. Google is still huge there in most of Europe. Russia's different. Russia's a little bit more like China. Russia has its own social networks that are really strong.
Are there any of the other countries that have the live streaming like China does? I mean, where that's their primary. I mean, it was just fascinating to me. And if you haven't seen the movie or documentary, go watch it.
Yeah, People's Republic of Desire. I don't know that anyone live streams quite like that. I mean, I think Koreans probably have it around things like gaming. I mean, we didn't talk about Twitch, but Twitch is a major platform and probably the closest thing to People's Republic of Desire that we have in America, watching people play games and also subscribing to people as they talk about games and give hints and do things like that, and having a lot of live commentary flowing. The flow of Twitch is similar to the flow of what you see there. But I mean, I think live streaming, it happens in a lot of platforms, but nothing on the scale or the scope or the financial implications of what's happening in China right now.
And then after you discuss the different countries, you go to the measurement of influence, which now you're getting to the heart of what marketers always want to measure, the engagement.
Right.
So what's your take on Instagram doing away with public likes?
Yeah, really interesting. I mean, I think it's a bad move for people who want to understand the media, like me. I think I'm attracted to social media because it's public facing, and the more information you can provide, the better. I just think this is another stain on Facebook. To be honest, I don't think you want to take away people's power. I think knowledge is power and information is power. And a lot of Silicon Valley companies have gotten where they are because they gave away a lot of information. And thus empowered people through the technology. I think when you do these little power grabs, taking things away and then starting to charge for them, you create these elites. And I don't particularly like it. So I think measurement should be, as much as possible, transparent, out in the open, verifiable, and those who come up with those numbers should be accountable for them.
And how is the typical influence? Let's go Instagram first. Mm-hmm. How is the typical Instagram influencer measured? Their influence if they're doing an ad campaign?
Yeah, I mean it's pretty simple. So it's reach and engagement, right? So you've got the number of people who are subscribers or who see that post, and then you've got engagement, and engagement's where it starts to get fluffy. So engagement can be a like, for example, your public likes, or it can be a comment. And then we get to the level of what some are calling contextual engagement, which means it's not just a comment like yay or right on or an emoji. Maybe now we start to look at what the content of that was and what the context was. Was it substantial? Was there a conversation that happened? Did somebody post something and then someone else replied and then someone else replied and then maybe the influencer themselves got involved in the conversation and they unpacked it? Was it negative about the product? So right now a comment just shows up as a comment, as a kind of engagement. But maybe the person says, well, I tried that drink and I thought it tasted like swamp water, right? That shows up as engagement. We don't really pick that up. So we're getting a bit more subtle, which I really like. We're getting a little bit introducing quality, but most of it is about It's numbers. Still about reach. Yeah. It's still very much about, what is the audience size. And I think the move, which we haven't talked about yet, to using more micro and nano influencers in particular.
And how do you define micro versus nano?
Yeah,
everybody I talk to defines them differently.
It's fluffy, but let's say a nano influencer would be somewhere in the level of 1,000 to 10 or so thousand followers on Instagram. Usually Instagram's, kind of the basis for everything. And then I'd say a micro is somewhere on the level of, 10,000 to 100,000-ish, roughly. Everyone is slightly different. Right. But I think for me, the way I would define it would be a little bit more tactically. I would say that nano influencers are people who still read and can interact with a large number of most of their followers, that they actually have that ongoing relationship. Once you get big enough, you start to lose that ability. You can't do it.
Or there's a staff person that does it.
Yeah, exactly. Which sort of defeats the point.
Right.
Right?
We're now finishing your class.
Oh, wow.
Oh, I know.
It was a quick 15 weeks. Yeah. Exam time.
Yes.
John, that's where I get to ask you questions, John.
Well, I was trying to think of, the question I had down was what type of influencer deals exist, but let me change that.
You know that better than
I know,
I do.
yeah, I mean,
Sure.
that's
That's easy.
But where do you see brand deals going? Where do you see the future of brand deals?
I like to think that the PR perspective of relationships is going to lead to more longer term contracts, so that maybe you don't have these, X number of posts for X number of time, but maybe you sign on with an influencer.
2-year deal or something.
They become like a spokesperson, and you maybe bring them on board with product launches. Maybe you bring them into meetings to help design. I mean, I really think that a huge amount of potential exists in having influencers speak directly to companies for their audiences, so that they're even a proxy, so that you actually use them for consumer insight, for marketing research, that they become someone who's involved in the new product development process, for example, as another voice. I think that's we've placed them in this category as advertising, right, as sort of mouthpieces. But I think one of their great talents is that they're able to incorporate the perspective of a particular segment, a particular group of people, and then express that really well. Why wouldn't we use that in order to have them speak for those people in a corporation?
Well, I mean, my view is because it's so new that they're not really understood.
Yeah.
But I think that's changing, which leads to prediction time.
Okay,
This
I
is
like
the
predictions.
prediction
Good,
time.
predictions.
Okay.
All right.
What are some of the greatest challenges? Let's set the baseline.
Okay.
What's some of the greatest challenges currently being faced by social media?
Well, I mean, I think we know what these are. It's polarization. It's filter bubbles. It's a small group of people with very strong and extreme opinions dominating the conversation. And I think it's giving us a very slanted view of what the average person thinks and does. And it's very hard in a free society to shut that down in a way that is respectful and responsible to the fact that people are going to have strong emotional reactions.
You have the
to a
whole
lot of different
YouTube
things.
controversy of the First Amendment on the one hand,
Yeah.
but violation of terms of use, hate speech on the other.
Sure, copyright too. I mean, YouTube's been struggling with that for a long time. How do we deal with that? That's a really vexing problem and a big question. I do think. Okay, you're going to ask me to make some specific predictions, so I'll wait. Hold off on what I'm going to say.
No,
Okay.
tell me. They'll be
Well,
leading.
I do think that regulation is necessary and around the corner. I think we've been very slow here in America to actually regulate this in a way that's ethical and smart. The thing
That
about
was on my list, actually.
yeah, the thing about regulation is, you don't always get it right the first time, but you see what works and what doesn't, and then you make adjustments. By not doing anything, we haven't given ourselves an opportunity yet to really figure out what will and won't work. And we're leaving this up to Silicon Valley companies that have proven that they are not responsible enough to be handling this. Unfortunately, we've regulated every form of advertising, but we've left this thing alone because we've been seduced by the language and the imagery of extreme difference. There's a couple of great books. One by Josie Van Dyke, who's a European researcher, wrote a book called The Culture of Connectivity, and she charts out how Facebook played the language games that were required around this term sharing, which takes things out of the commercial realm and puts them into the social realm of what we would call as anthropologists gift economies. The people it's just a social version of sharing. It's not actually sharing that goes on. This is content distribution, and it's not regulated and not seen in that light because they've been very successful at doing this social marketing to the public and to government to say we should be different. Now this has been different in Europe for a while. It's getting more different in Europe. China's the extreme end of it. But the U.S., I think, is looking like a laggard in terms of how they're managing one of their biggest industries.
What do you think the impact of deep fakes will be?
More confusion, more lack of trust, things that are disruptive to public relations and to marketing. I mean, there's a real serious question here. If you're in this business, about what the long-term future is if you degrade people's belief in the truth and their trust in experts, their trust in government, their trust in authority. Currently, I think the last Edelman Truth Meter poll showed that people trust corporations more than they trust their own government. Some people take delight in that. I don't think that's a good thing for us. And I think corporations are still at a very low level of trust historically. They're trying to regain that. But I think what's also happened is people don't trust each other. People don't trust the average person. So the average American wants to know what side of the political spectrum someone is before they can talk to them, trust them, marry them, like them, shake their hand. That's not a good place for us to be as a nation. That's something that has to change. And I don't see strong positive action being taken in any sphere in order to really address that problem. Social media has made it a lot worse.
Your prediction for the interplay of privacy and social media. I mean, Facebook did this famous privacy turn, which is only after a $5 billion fine.
Yeah. Well, is it a turn? Do you think?
No.
Are there teeth to that?
Of course it's
right,
no.
Of course it's not.
Of course not.
You're asking me on the day that Capital One just came out with a breach of how many 100 million or more Capital One accounts were breached today? That was the first story in the news. It's terrible. It's getting worse, and it's likely to only get worse. We don't have privacy. We're getting used to being spied on. I just talked to a colleague of mine who's gone on a 2-year cell phone hiatus. So he gave up his cell phone for 2 years, and the reason was, he said, because they know everything. They know where I am. They know what I'm thinking. They know what I'm doing. They know, right? They know who I call. He's like, I don't trust these companies. And he works with these companies. He says, I don't trust them enough to want them to know every single personal detail of my life.
Myself.
And we've got a generation of kids growing up that are so used to trading off
They've
every
never known
element.
privacy.
Right. They've never known privacy. It's just a word to them. It doesn't really mean anything. And so I think it's bad for our civilization. It's bad for our democracy. It's bad for us individually.
Where do you see the industry in 5 years?
Influencer or social media in general? Or?
Let me ask it both ways. Let's do social media first and then influencer.
Yeah, I think in 5 years, I think there will be some big changes in terms of new rules. I think it's going to be, there will be some sorts of verification, because we're getting to that. The companies are slowly but surely throwing things against the wall to see what sticks in terms of verifying. I think we're going to get more of that.
And I think that's where the role of deep fakes comes in.
Yeah. I think it's all going to sort of come together. There will probably be some event or series of events, probably not such good ones, that are going to draw us to this level of realizing that we have to have some kind of level of verification of whether someone's got expertise, who's talking, what they're trying to do, a bit more transparency in that process. 5 years is a long time in social media, as we know. Things could be very different. I think we'll continue to see some of the same major players, but I think that at some level, and I'm suspecting it might be the EU who's leading the charge here, we get more and more ethical regulation and more regulation, on the level of really, really major fines and major regulations. So, the companies like Google and Facebook that have to deal in Europe too, they've made changes that affect us in America because their systems are global, a lot of them. And so we're benefiting from regulation that the Europeans are putting in. It would be nice if Americans could put in some regulation that everybody would also benefit from.
And where do you see the influencers being in 5 years?
I think it's going to be bigger than it's ever been. I think influencers are going to cross over into Hollywood a lot more. I think we're going to see this being much more of a farm team for major media. And I also think we're going to see more going the other way, that major media is going to shrink in a lot of ways. I also think we're due for some kind of reckoning in terms of television, which is a very overpriced medium for
Right.
what it's been delivering. And there will be an adjustment and a shift, and a lot as some of that television money, which has been really staying in television a lot longer than a lot of us thought it would, starts to shift into the influencer economy, that economy is going to bloom, and the microsystems are going to bloom. A lot of areas that ties into the advice I was giving before.
Right.
A lot of areas that we haven't seen a lot of activity are going to get active, and we're going to see a lot of flowering of niche areas, a lot of activity. So I think what we're seeing in influencers right now is going to double or triple in 5 years.
So this is not going
more.
away.
Not at all. Not at all. No, I was teaching social media classes, 4 or 5 years before everybody else. The fact that I'm teaching an influencer relations class should be a signal,
indicator,
right?
yes.
That this is going to be around for a while. We're writing a textbook so that we can systematize this. But I expect as we talk about it more, as we teach it more, as it becomes part of a business school curriculum, a communication school curriculum, we're going to turn out more and more professionals. It's going to be more professional than it's been. Measurements are going to get better, and the people who are doing it, I think, are going to get a lot of benefit, because people are going to understand that this is about relationships and openness, and not just treating them like marketing mouthpieces.
One last question.
Sure. Oh, one last
question.
Wow.
And from a lawyer, I'm going to ask one last question.
Yeah.
Where can people find you on the internet?
Oh, that's an easy one. My Twitter account is Kozinets, at Kozinets. And that's probably the best place to reach me now. My Instagram's a lot of art and other things, but or they can look me up on the website here at USC. The Annenberg site's got a long bio, and
Google
contact
Scholar
information.
has many articles about you.
Google Scholar, yeah. If you're interested in the academic side, definitely take a look at Google Scholar, and keep your eyes posted to the conversation. I've got articles in the works there as well. So thank you so much,
Thank
John.
you.
It's been a really great interview. Thanks a lot.
That's it for this time. If you enjoyed our podcast, please write a review on iTunes and tell your friends to subscribe. If you have any questions about influencers or suggestions for future episodes, email them to John at Pfeiffer@pfeifferlaw.com. Thank you for listening.